We're back with another episode of Mac Stories Unwind. Today's episode is brought to you by Collide. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Vitici. Hi, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing all right. You know, I'm starting to rest post Mac OS review. I'm starting to kind of unwind, loosen up a little bit, and I'm going to have more picks as a result for Unwind. And I have a good one today, I think. But I wanted, before we get to our picks, I wanted today to talk to you about road trips, car trips.
Car trips.
And the differences, yes, the differences between what Americans do with road trips and what Europeans do.
Okay.
All right. Or I guess specifically Italians, since I know you don't speak for the entire continent of Europe. We wouldn't want to presume that, but you can if you'd like.
Most of the times I don't. Well, yeah, okay.
Okay. And what got me thinking about this was, I guess last week it's a long story, but I was at my sister-in-law's house in Virginia, and I drove on a Tuesday, 6 hours up to Philadelphia to drop my son off at college. And then I drove like eight and a half back. So roughly 14 hours in one day with a couple hour break in the middle to eat lunch and unpack the car. And it was brutal. I mean, it's one of those days where it's like, in a way, it was a really nice rest from working on the review because I wasn't using my brain at all. I was just listening to an audiobook, the one that I recommended last week. But that's just a lot of driving for one person because it was just me. My wife wasn't with me, so I didn't have anybody to take over for me and give me a break. And I just kind of powered through it. And I thought to myself, where could you get in a 14-hour drive from Rome?
Ooh. Anyway,
and I thought you can get a lot of places, it turns out. So I want to give you, do you want to take a guess? I can tell you some places.
14 hours without stopping?
Yeah, with basically no stops.
Realistically, I could probably get to Paris.
Yep. That's almost exactly right. Yes, Paris is right around 14.
I could get to 14 Madrid, maybe. I
definitely can get to Barcelona because I saw Barcelona.
You can get to Barcelona? You can get in 14
Barcelona. Yeah, you can go right along the coast and you get there in about 13 and a half.
Oh, I was going to say 16, 17. Okay, that's good, I guess.
Yeah. You can get all the way to Barcelona. You can get to Frankfurt too.
Oh, yeah, to Frankfurt. Okay, I was going to say Berlin.
Yeah, I think that I didn't check Berlin, but I think definitely you can definitely get to Frankfurt. And I was heading in my mind, I was heading further east, and I looked. You could almost make it to Krakow, Poland. Almost.
Really?
That's like 15 and a half. That's an extra
to Krakow, it's 15.
Yeah, 15 and a half, maybe.
I was going to say somewhere in the Czech Republic. I guess you can go further than that if you're not stopping.
Yep. You can go pretty far. Now, look, you obviously do have to have stops for gas and things. Like when I came back so I guess my stops were, I did 6 up to Philadelphia. I had a couple of hours off doing stuff there. And then on the way home in the 8 hours back to North Carolina, I stopped. I literally did only stop for 10 minutes to use the bathroom and buy some gas. That was it. And that was pretty brutal because I got home I basically got home, rolled into bed, and that was it.
I am blanking at the moment. Which state is Philadelphia in? Don't tell me.
It's in Pennsylvania.
It's Pennsylvania. Yeah, you're right.
It is.
And Pittsburgh is in Pennsylvania too, right?
It is. Pittsburgh's kind of in the middle-ish of the
state. Why do I know Pittsburgh? What's in Pittsburgh?
Well, I mean, there's a river that goes through Pittsburgh. The Pittsburgh Steelers football team are probably pretty well known.
Is the Icon Factory based in Pittsburgh?
No,
the software company?
So. No. I mean, they're spread out, but I think Jed's in North Carolina and like Craig Hockenberry's in California.
Why am I thinking of Pittsburgh? What's in Pittsburgh?
I don't know. You know what? There was an Apple office in Pittsburgh. It might have been like the iWork team. I think I heard one time.
I think I'm thinking of a character from the old TV show teen drama, The OC. You know, The OC.
Okay, sure. Of course.
Shaped me as an adult person in my teenage year. And I think a character, Anna. I think Anna from The OC, she was originally from Pittsburgh. And Seth, one of the main characters from The OC, goes to visit her in Pittsburgh. And I think in the TV show, I believe the reason was there's like, well, at least in the fictional universe of the OC,
Yeah.
there was like some kind of school to become a comic book artist in Pittsburgh.
Okay. Maybe in real life there is. I have no idea. There is a university there. There's like there's Pitt University, University of Pittsburgh. No, Pittsburgh University. I don't know.
Comic book university.
I love how your entire, like, so much of your knowledge of the United States is shaped by the OC. It's hilarious.
Graphic novels and comic books, University of Pittsburgh. Maybe there's some kind of course, some kind of
Maybe they're known for that. I did not know that. I'm not up on my University of Pittsburgh knowledge, but Philadelphia is like right on, it's right on the coast basically. So Philadelphia is kind of unique because it brings together, you can within a very short drive be in Maryland, Pennsylvania, Delaware, or New Jersey. So they're all kind of, those states all kind of come together right at the coast there. So
Delaware. Joe Biden is from Delaware, right?
He is. So immediately when I drove out of Philadelphia, I cut through Delaware for a short time. And before you know it, I was in Maryland for quite a while. Pennsylvania is a big state, at least if you're going east-west, because we used to do that all the time, visiting Jennifer's family in Massachusetts. We would drive from Chicago, and we would drive the length of Pennsylvania. And it's one of those states that you think it's maybe not that big, but you know what? It takes hours and hours to drive across. But yeah, all right. We've figured out where you could get to.
Yes.
In 14 hours from Rome. Would you ever do that?
I would go to Barcelona. At this point by car. I mean, realistically, I wouldn't do it in one go. It would be a two-way, like a 2-day trip, right? I wouldn't do it in one. Like, I wouldn't do what you did. I think
I don't recommend it. Yeah, I don't recommend it. I had a good break in between, but I think like 8 to 10 hours is, I can do that without too much trouble. But once you pass 10, it starts getting really uncomfortable.
Sylvia and I, we have considered the idea of, well, maybe next year we could drive to Barcelona, we could drive to Spain and go with our car and the dogs to Formentera again.
That would be
because
nice.
You would need to take a ferry, like a boat from Valencia, I believe, not from Barcelona. There are no direct lines from Barcelona to Formentera, obviously. But you could realistically, and I think Valencia is actually before, over the coast, it's before Barcelona. So maybe it's actually a shorter trip from Rome. But we could go there with our car. And I know that some people do it because I've seen some cars in Formentera with Italian license plates. And the only way to do it, obviously, I mean, unless you moved to Formentera for good with your car, I think some Italians do it. They actually drive all the way up to Spain, well, before to France and then to Spain, and go there with your own car instead of renting your car.
That's what I'm suggesting, because when I did the directions, I did driving directions. I didn't do ferry directions. Can you take a ferry all the way from Rome to Spain?
Yeah, but it's like 2 days. There's a boat.
I was going to say it's a long way to go.
It's a long way. I mean, if you consider that it's like 6 hours to get from this city near Rome called Civitavecchia. That's where you can take the boat to Sardinia, and it's like 6.5 hours.
Right. I was going to say you would probably want to stop in Sardinia overnight or something.
Yeah, but in thinking about this, you made me think of something from my youth that I don't think I ever shared with you or with our listeners. So when I was little, I'm gonna need to explain this to you. So you know how every year, and stay with me, you know how every year there's that Italian music festival, the Sanremo Music Festival, which is like, it gets televised, and whoever wins the Sanremo Music Festival qualifies to go to Eurovision.
Right.
It's called Sanremo. It's the name of the town. This town up above in the region of Liguria, that's above the Cinque Terre, the famous tourist location in Italy. And Sanremo is just before France. And it's like a 6.5 to 7 hour drive from Rome. Anyway, when I was little, my mom used to have this like vacation house in Sanremo that she inherited from her parents. And
Oh,
we
okay.
used to go there. And San Remo is a lovely beach town.
Oh,
And
I see where this is. That looks like
yeah.
it'd be perfect. It's really not that far from France and things like Marseille and yeah.
Yes, you can. There's Sanremo, Imperia, which is like the last town in Italy, and then there's France,
Right,
and
because Nice is right there.
Nice is right
Not
there, exactly.
right.
And so a lot of people do that kind of stop, like they go like central Italy, Sanremo, they spend a couple of days there. Maybe you visit Imperia, and then you drive all the way to Nice, and you're in France. In any case, Sanremo is one of the few cities in Italy. This is why I wanted to mention this, that has a casino.
Oh,
And
interesting.
in a future episode of Unwind, I would like to talk about casinos because it sounds
we
to me
should.
like there's a whole subculture of casinos in the United States.
There really is.
I believe we have like 2, 3 in Italy, like proper casinos. And obviously, when I was little, I couldn't even enter the casino because I was underage. And
Right.
I can only see it from outside. It's just beautiful building, super classy. I have no idea what it's like inside. But it's like my mom used to tell me, see, that's the casino, but we cannot go in there because you're 10. And obviously I couldn't go inside. But that sort of left me, and we no longer have that house in San Remo, by the way. They sold it when I was like 14.
Okay.
And but that left me with this like curiosity for casinos. And look, I'm not a gambling person. I don't know. I honestly don't know any card game. I cannot play poker. I cannot play blackjack. I cannot play anything. And I've never been into the whole gambling scene. It's not just something that fascinates me. My fascination for casinos comes from the movie Ocean's 11.
Oh, sure. Sure.
So I guess I think of casinos more in the context of a heist.
Uh-huh. All right. All right. Well, you know what? You and I really should talk about casinos.
Have I given you enough material? Okay.
Oh, lots of material, because you know what? I don't know really much any more than you do, but I think that would
Okay.
actually make for a very good conversation. Two people who have no idea what they're talking about, giving their impressions of casinos from around the world. That sounds like a show,
Like-
don't you think?
Like, is it true? And this is maybe our listeners before the next episode, they could give us some pointers here. Like, is it
Yes.
true that the casino management has cameras all over the place and they check?
Oh,
when you-
that's true. Yeah, that's
Is
true.
it true? Well, do you
Oh,
know
that's
it?
very
Is it
true.
true?
Yeah, I've been to Las Vegas, not for very many years, and then I think I've also been to one casino. And here's one for you to think about before we talk about this. A lot of the casinos in the United States are run on reservations, on Native American reservations.
Huh. Really?
Yeah, because I mean, to make money, obviously, but they're governed by different law and this is where I'm already out of my depth. But they're not regulated in the same way that a state is regulated. Like a state doesn't have control over a Native American reservation. It's more of a federal thing.
Interesting. All right.
And they live under their own law even. I mean, it's like a whole thing. It's like almost like another country within the United States. And they're sprinkled, all over the place in the United States.
Interesting. Okay. So we'll talk about this in the future. I
Yes.
don't know how we got here. Well, because
I don't
you
either.
asked me about like how far can you go with the car. But yeah, all right. We'll talk about this in the future. Now you know this about me.
Do people do long road trips though? Do you have any
Yeah.
friends who do
Yeah.
long road trips,
Yeah,
like go up to France or Germany or I don't know, Croatia or something?
Well, okay. So Croatia, yeah, in the summer, usually if
Yeah.
you're like just out of high school and you put together like a group of 5 friends and you want to take your high school diploma trip. And I know
Yeah.
I know plenty of people. This is a new thing in Italy that it became a trend over the past couple of years. Lots of people, I was going to say my age, thinking that I'm still 25. I'm no longer 25. Lots of people younger than me over the past couple of years have discovered Albania as a tourist destination.
Oh, interesting.
I know so many people who have gone on vacation this summer in Albania. And I mean, the pictures look great. And so I don't know what the Albanian government has been doing lately in terms of like attracting tourists, but it's working.
It's got a lot of coast, so I assume it's got beaches and
coast and mountains. I mean, the pictures look great. So anyway, yeah, I know people who have gone to Croatia by car. I wouldn't say it's a common thing to do, but it's not like wild. Now it's more difficult to hear somebody who said, I drove all the way to Barcelona. Now, that's a rare thing to do, I would say.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it is pretty common here, as you can imagine. I actually met at our colleague Alex Gio's wedding. I met friends of his parents who drove to the wedding, drove from Arizona to Minnesota.
That sounds long.
They took yeah, it's got to be really long. I don't even have any idea, but they spent 2 weeks doing it with a camper, and then they were going to take another week to go home. They were retired, so I mean they had the time to do it, I guess. But yeah, it was a long trip. So yeah, that's the kind of thing that a lot of people do here. I've never been a camper type, but I have driven all the way out to California and back just once. I will never do it again. I don't think. It was brutal, but that's a whole nother story. This episode of Mac Stories Unwind is brought to you by Collide. If you work in security or IT and your company has Okta, this message is for you. Have you ever noticed that in the past few years, the majority of data breaches and hacks you read about have something in common? It's employees. Hackers absolutely love exploiting vulnerable employee devices and credentials, but it doesn't have to be that way. Imagine a world where only secure devices can access your cloud apps. In this world, phished credentials are useless to hackers, and you can manage every OS, even Linux, from a single dashboard. Best of all, you can get employees to fix their own device security issues without creating more work for IT. The good news is you don't have to imagine this world. You can just start using Collide. Collide is the device trust solution for companies with Okta, and it ensures that if a device isn't trusted and secure, it can't log on to your cloud apps. Visit collide.com/MacStoriesUnwind to watch a demo video and see how it works. That's KOLIDE.com/MacStoriesUnwind. Our thanks to Collide for their support of the show.
So tell me about this pick that you have in your notes.
Yeah, so I wrote about this earlier this week, which is we finally have gotten Apple Music radio shows and some Apple News content in the Apple Podcasts app. And I think this is actually a really good place for these two things. Right until then, what you had was you could go to the radio tab in the Apple Music app, or there's a special tab in News with audio if you are a News Plus subscriber. That comes with like an Apple One package, plus you can subscribe to it separately, I guess. But one of the problems, and it's something you and I have talked about in the past with the radio shows in Apple Music, is that it's really hard to know when they're on or when there's something new, or if some particular artist that you're interested in has had an interview with Zane Lowe or whoever it might be. And I think podcast is going to help a lot with this because, first of all, the Apple Podcasts app can send you notifications when there's a new episode. And that alone, to me, is really useful. Plus, when I go looking for something to listen to, a podcast that I already subscribe to, I'm looking for audio, I'm looking for spoken content, and radio shows fit very well into that. And I've already found myself going to these things a couple of times in the first 2 days that they've been available. And, sampling through the Matt Wilkinson show, that's one of my favorites. That's one of my recommendations. There's an alt control show, which is really just interview snippets from other radio shows, or I guess the alt control radio show. It's just interviews with artists. And this is where I think one of the things that's hard with some podcasts is that, and we know this from having interviewed people before, if you interview somebody who listeners don't want to listen to, they just don't listen. And so they're the kind of shows that you have to be more picky with, I think. So I decided to follow Alt Control and the Zane Lowe interviews, both of those. But I don't ever really intend to listen to all of them. I'll just kind of take a look at it, see who's being interviewed, and maybe add them to my queue. But it's nice because, podcasts also has that queuing feature. So I may be listening to Connected 1 minute and an interview with Taylor Swift the next, which I think is fit together in a way, in my mind, that I think is a good good way to listen to these things. And there are a handful of radio shows that I like on Apple Music, and they're good for things like long car rides. I mean, I really wish I had this a week ago when I did that long car trip, because I would have loaded up. I ran out of podcast material after 4 or 5 hours. I was fairly caught up on my queue, and I ran out, and that's why I downloaded an audiobook for the rest of the trip. But if I had layered in some radio shows and some interviews, that would have been a nice way to fill the time as well. And then Apple News has fewer shows. They've got 4 total. There's one called News Today, which is the kind of show that I think I would listen to probably pretty regularly, because it's really just like a 10-minute digest of the top stories from around the world. And I've only listened to it a couple of times, but the first one had a bunch of stories about the floods in Libya, and then had something else about the elections in the United States. And then, there's just there are 4 or 5 different big stories from around the world that is kind of a nice digest of the news. And then there are two others. And one that I think I've mentioned on the show before is called News Plus Narrated. And this is what was from the tab, and it's still there in the tab in Apple News, where they take long form writing and have a professional narrator, voice actor, narrate the story. And sometimes these are very long. They can be 30, 40, 50 minutes long at times. And they tend to be long, in-depth stories from places like the New Yorker or maybe Bloomberg, and it's a wide variety of stuff. You'll find there'll be tech stories, or there'll be political stories, or just general weird human interest stories. And so again, it's one of those things where I'm going to look at it and there'll be a bunch of stuff that I don't really care about and I won't listen to. But it's a very nice way to kind of round out a queue, especially if you're low on shows. I know a lot of people never get low on podcasts, but I sometimes do. And this is a nice way to kind of fill in the gaps and listen to something that's a little different and maybe learn something about a topic that you're interested in. And then the final one that I'll mention from Apple News is called In Conversation, which is usually some sort of interview and a more in-depth, going in more depth than the News Today, where it goes just on one topic. And again, that's the kind of thing, there was a recent one that's an interview with Walter Isaacson, who just published that book about Elon Musk, that biography. I thought I might listen to that, because I find actually I'm not interested in the Elon Musk book at all, but I'm very interested in the writing of the Elon Musk book in a lot of ways, and what the experience of being a writer in that situation must be like. And I've listened to a couple of interviews Isaacson's done so far, and it does sound like it was kind of a fascinating experience from a writing perspective. So, I'll pick up 1 or 2 here and there and do that as well. But yeah, it's kind of like it. All right, Federico, that's it for this week's episode. Thanks again to Collide for supporting the show. You can find us at macstories.net. We're on Mastodon. Just go to vitici.macstories.net to follow Federico, or johnvorhees.macstories.net to follow me. And we're on Instagram, where Federico is at Vitici. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees, JOHNVOORHEES. Talk to you later, Federico.
Ciao, John.